Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are now entering day 111 in the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. We continue to see both sides continuing to mobilize and prepare for what could be a fairly long conflict. We are probably right now seeing a much wider mobilization taking place inside of the Russian Federation than initially thought. The Russians, while not conducting a overt mass mobilization of its armed forces, it is conducting a rather significant regional mobilization process to include the bonusing of prospective former veterans of the Russian armed forces, and then obviously newer, younger individuals as well, just turning of age and able to join the ranks of the armed forces. But you continue to hear that Russia is running out of infantry, and that is one tidbit of information I tend to see in some of the comment section, and that is simply not the case. Obviously, the Russians going into this had fairly high hopes of a rapid takedown of the Ukrainian government and then seizing control of Kiev. And unfortunately for the Russian side of things, that did not happen. And now we're kind of seeing the more or less war of firepower and mass being used now by Russian forces. So, do the Russians have the amount of infantrymen that they would like to have in terms of conducting some of these large-scale urban fights that are ongoing and such in Severodonetsk and eventually Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, and further to the northwest near Kharkov? No, the answer to that right now is obviously not. But with that being said, Russian forces continue to mobilize and increase in combat capacity as this war continues. You have to understand that the Russians were at one point obviously preparing to fight World War III, especially during Soviet times, with Western Europe and the United States. And there are large stockpiles of weapons and ammunition inside of the Russian Federation that can be used to further mobilize combat units. Now, are these systems high-end, high-technology systems? No, they're not. But a T-80 BV or a earlier model T-72 in daylight operations will do about what a T-90 can do in daylight operations. Now, obviously, when night falls and the opposing force could be using thermal imaging optics on its tanks or other weapon systems, then yeah, that does pose a risk to some of these formations. But as the saying goes, quality is great, but quantity has a quality all its own, and that's kind of what we're seeing right now. And especially when some of these Ukrainian units are starting to run out of the ability to wage war, both one in terms of casualties being taken by its forces, and the continued expenditure of massive amounts of ammunition. And remember, as I talked about in previous episodes, the Russians have the ability to continue to launch attacks deep inside of Ukrainian territory. Now, with that being said, recently and just within the last 24, 48 hours, we have seen additional Ukrainian special operations attacks deeper into Russian territory. We have seen that kind of like in the north of the country, more towards the Belarusian border. And we can expect to see those types of continued operations by Ukrainian forces as this conflict continues. But right now, the biggest thing for the Ukrainians isn't the issue of providing massive pools of manpower to the front line. It's equipping those soldiers. And as I talked about in previous episodes, that is becoming more and more difficult for Ukrainian forces as this conflict continues. But I got right now the hot zone of the conflict, the Sloviansk, Severodonetsk, Bakhmut triangle, of where we're kind of seeing the most of the heavy fighting taking place. And as I talked about yesterday, not a lot of changes occurring. We're continuing to seeing this monotonous, this methodical drive by Russian forces, continuing this pressure campaign against Ukrainian forces. And we're receiving more and more anecdotal reports coming out of the Ukrainian side that indicates the situation, again, is becoming much more precarious in the eastern sector of the theater of operations for the Ukrainians. Again, Russians not conducting massive amounts of maneuver operations. Could that happen in the near future? Possibly. As the Russian forces continue to degrade and destroy Ukrainian units with long-range fires capability, we could see that situation change on the ground. But again, not a lot of changes in terms of day-to-day. Specifically, we're looking quite a bit like we were yesterday, with really the Russians right now continuing to focus on operations south of Izum. Severodonetsk, obviously, that clearing operation continues, and continued operations near Popasna as the Russians continue to advance on Lysychansk from the rear, and continues to try and force its way towards Bakhmut along both towards the M3, and at the same time looking to cut the Bakhmut to Severodonetsk main highway. We've been talking about that for some days now, and the Ukrainian defensive operations in this area, led by 80th Air Assault Air Mobile Brigade, 24th Mechanized Brigade, 11th Territorial Brigade, 17th Tank Brigade, continues to provide fairly tenacious, and I forgot the 30th Mech Brigade as well, continues to provide very tenacious resistance against Russian forces in this area. The Ukrainian forces are facing some of the better Russian units within the scope of the Popasna area of operations, specifically large contingents of Russian naval infantry continue to operate in this area, being directly supported by Russian ground forces as well. But again, I think at this point right now, the West is taking a close look, specifically the United States. Officials inside of the Pentagon are again looking at this very, very closely in terms of is there an endpoint to this, and what would exactly have to be given to the Ukrainians to push or stop this Russian offensive. And the answer to that right now is in all probability quite a bit more than what is currently being given. Obviously, we have that $40 billion package. We have a host of systems, 155 millimeter howitzers, a range of various anti-tank guided weapon systems, Javelin, NLAW, what have you. But also other systems as well, such as the HIMARS could come into play, but how much is going to have to be delivered, and at what risk at some point do we see the expansion of the conflict? And unlike a lot of analysts who believe that Russia is going to be in a weaker position, maybe 1 to 2 year down the road, I am taking the opposite position. I think this is going to cause, again, the expansion of the Russian armed services. You will see the ground forces, in all probability, double in size. You will see the expansion of the National Guard and the continued expansion, even that was going on pre-war, of the VDV, or airborne formations, and obviously the coastal defense and naval infantry formations as well. So while yes, you will see the probability of Finland and Sweden joining NATO, you will also see the expansion of the Russian armed forces as well. And then you have that ever closening relationship between China and Russia currently ongoing as well, which is going to prove an additional challenge for the Western states and East Asian states as we continue to march down this path of history that is quickly turning more towards the what I would call the military equation, in terms of nation states rectifying certain problems and challenges between adversarial states through the use of military means. We have seen for a long time during the Cold War that things were able to remain relatively stable, with both sides looking to increase their spheres of influence. But now we're seeing the direct application of military power being more and more used, and just not the Russian Federation. I mean, look, go back to 2003, and if you're sitting on the Russian side of the fence, and a lot of nations did not perceive Iraq as a direct threat to the United States, yet the United States conducted an all-out invasion of Iraq and conducted a regime change of Saddam Hussein's government. And then obviously we have seen other instances in which kinetic military power was used directly. Libya, Serbia, Yugoslavia. So what we're seeing now taking place in Ukraine is not a lot different than what certain aspects of the United States foreign policy was being used, in terms of its ability to turn to kinetic hard power to seek outcomes that it desired. And the Russians are pretty much doing the same thing that the United States did in some of these other campaigns. Again, Iraq, Yugoslavia, and Libya as well. But that's kind of where we're at right now. And again, I would say the future right now is tends to be troubling, in terms of the continued use of military power and the possible expansion of hostilities is very much present, in terms of the possibility that we could see some sort of direct conflict between the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the United States, and Russia, and Belarus as well. But we'll continue to watch what is happening very, very closely, and obviously bring you more content for your consumption. Again, appreciate everyone's joining in and watching the channel. Greatly appreciate it. Feel free to leave comments in the comment section, and we will talk again very, very soon. Have a good day.